Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honor to stand here tonight. The Canadian Federation of Students is on the Hill today, and I thank them for their work ringing the alarm on sexual violence on campus. We are talking here about the federal failure to lead on preventing campus rape. 1 in 5 women will experience sexual violence while studying at a post-secondary institution. Young women in Canada face, and we heard this at the Status of Women Committee, a fragmented patchwork and often inaccessible services across the country. In some cases, there are non-existent policies in their schools and workplaces. We heard especially why this is a national issue. A woman who is raised, maybe her big sister goes to UBC and learns one sort of framework for supporting sexual safety on campus, but also the reporting system and the justice system that might accommodate it if, as happens so often, women are the most vulnerable their first few weeks away from home, their first few weeks on campus. So particularly vulnerable to campus rape and sexual assault. That young woman may well herself go to school at Dalhousie in Nova Scotia, the other side of the country, without any family support, may find a completely different framework, both to prevent assault and then to respond to it, both from a healthcare and a justice system. That's why it's so important for the federal government to step in, use its good words around feminism and acting to prevent violence against women, and take that leadership role to coordinate campus and post-secondary responses to prevent and respond to campus sexual assault. We met, myself and some of my colleagues met with a group named Our Turn, a national student-led association who are advocating for an action plan to end campus sexual violence. And their report gave Canada a very poor grade. It really showed us that work needs to be done. They talked so much also about the impacts, mental health impacts, changes in how victims of campus assault view trust. We really do commend their report. So, Status of Women Committee made recommendations, I think 11 months ago now, recommendations 7, 8, 9, 10, and observation 1 on actions that the federal government could take. And the NDP specifically asked Canada, quote, to lead national coordination of policies to prevent campus rape, and that the federal government lead national coordination around policing and in the justice system to ensure equal access to protection and justice across the country for victims of violence against women and girls. That's more than 11 months ago. The only answer that we got from the Status of Women Minister is this, quote, preventing and addressing violence is a shared provincial and territorial and federal responsibility. Currently, all provincial territorial governments have initiatives or actions underway that are related to gender-based violence. That was it. So my question through you, Madam Speaker, to the government is, when are you going to take this leadership role, and do you have anything more to tell us than this highly inadequate response?
Again, I'd like to remind the member that she is to address the question to the Speaker and not to the Parliamentary Secretary. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Status of Women.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the Honourable Member for all of her efforts to combat gender-based violence and her very fine work on the Status of Women Standing Committee. And I think the Honourable Member will acknowledge that our government has made a strong commitment to ensuring that all women and girls can live lives free of violence, because we know that the damage it does to women, their families and communities is absolutely unacceptable, Madam Speaker. Gender-based violence happens in both public and private spaces, including at home, at work, at school, on college or university campuses, and online. It often occurs because of someone's gender identity, or perceived gender. Women and girls, as well as LGBTQ2 and gender non-conforming people, are more likely to experience gender-based violence. The same is true for Indigenous peoples, young women, people with disabilities, seniors, and those living in rural and remote communities. That's why, Madam Speaker, one of our government's first priorities upon taking office was to begin developing a federal strategy on gender-based violence. Listening to Canadians was a first critical step. We engaged Canadians and met with experts, advocates, and survivors from across the country, Madam Speaker, to hear about their insights and experiences. The result was an investment, the first investment of its kind, Madam Speaker, of $100.9 million over 5 years for a plan entitled It's Time, Canada's Strategy to Prevent and Address Gender-Based Violence. The title underscores our desire to engage Canadians in a conversation with three major elements. It's time to better understand the problem, it's time to believe survivors, and it's time for action. I think the honourable member would also agree we need to break cycles of violence and prevent gender-based violence from occurring in the first place. The strategy is based on three pillars: prevention, support for survivors and their families, and promoting responsive legal and justice systems. To fill the gaps in data and knowledge on this issue, we are working with Statistics Canada in order to develop a new questionnaire designed to capture information on sexual victimization among students enrolled at post-secondary institutions in Canada. It will focus on experiences or witnessing of sexual misconduct, harassment, and sexual assault, as well as impressions of the campus climate and feelings of personal safety. In order to make this as successful as possible, Madam Speaker, and reach as many post-secondary campuses as possible, we are also working with the provinces and territories on the development and implementation of the survey. Just in closing, Madam Speaker, we intend to continue our whole-of-government approach to improving how we respond to gender-based violence in this country, with the goal of engaging all Canadians, including men and boys, as part of the solution. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll certainly agree with my colleague across the aisle that this government has made very deep commitments to women and to preventing violence against women, but that action is not following. This was a debate we were having in the House 4 months ago. The minister, and I asked specifically about campus rape, the minister chose not even to mention students or campus in her answer. And I note, although the member opposite is describing a survey, not a single witness at our multi-month study recommended that we further survey the problem. They asked the federal government to lead, to take leadership, to coordinate a national response so that young women across the country have equivalent access to justice. Why will this government not take leadership to end campus rape?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Status of Women.
Well, thank you again, Madam Speaker, and the honourable member mentioned the word action, and we know action is needed if we are to create a safe, inclusive society for all Canadians, including on post-secondary campuses. There is some great work being done across the country by grassroots organizations and post-secondary institutions. We can learn from these best practices. Through our strategy to prevent and address gender-based violence, a knowledge center will support new, enhanced research and data collection to create opportunities to share that knowledge and ensure informed decision-making. This is one more part of the whole-of-government approach we are taking to help end all forms of gender-based violence. I want to thank the honourable member for the question, and thank you, Madam Speaker.